Samuel. Okay. Today's lesson is 1 Samuel 27, 1 through 12. And I entitled it David Is. So at the end of the lesson, at the end of the verses, there is one additional slide. I just wanted to make you aware. And when we get to the end, there's one additional slide. Can anyone give me 3 points from last week's lesson on 1 Samuel 26, 12 to the end of the chapter? Just 3 things that stood out from the lessons, whether it's one person giving me one and another person giving me something, one person giving me 3. And while I'm waiting on a response, I'll tell you what stood out for me about last week's lesson. It was another lesson about David sparing Saul's life. And what I thought was different was that this time when David and Saul had their exchange, they had witnesses. So Saul was in the midst of 3,000 of his army men. David came in, took the spear and his jug, and when they exchanged words, when David woke everybody up, everything that was said between them and everyone that was around him. So everyone saw that David spared Saul's life. Everyone heard what Saul said at the end, that he had to give him his accolades, like he's a more honorable man. So that's what stood out to me. They had witnesses about that interaction, whereas the first time it was David had witnesses in relation to the men that were with him in the cave, but the exchange was basically just between him and Saul. Does anyone want to share anything else about last week? Okay, well, we're going to keep it moving then. David is. So while we're looking at these verses, let's think about what David is in these 12 verses. Okay. First Samuel, I'm reading out the NIV version this time. For Samuel 27, verse 1 through 3. But David thought to himself, one of these days I will be destroyed by the hand of Saul. The best thing I can do is to escape to the land of the Philistines. Then Saul will give up searching for me anywhere in Israel, and I will slip out of his hand. So David and the 600 men with him left and went over to Achish, son of Maoch, king of Gath. David and his men settled in Gath with Achish. Each man had his family with him, and David had his 2 wives, Ahinoam of Jezreel and Abigail of Carmel, the widow of Nabal. Okay, the King James Version says, David said in his heart. So David had been anointed to be king. Why would David have the thought that he would be destroyed by Saul? Does anyone have any thoughts about that? Why would David have the thought? Why would he think in his heart that he would be destroyed by Saul?
The history is clear. I know we ended last week talking. Yolanda, can you go on mute? Um, I know we talked last week about, Saul was seen to be very sincere at the end of the chapter, giving him his accolades, recognizing who he was, and that he was in essence a better man than him. But because it had happened so many times, I don't know that David believed it, even though in reading it in hindsight, we think he was pretty sincere.
Okay. The history. Yes. Saul continues to just hunt him down like an animal. Last week you talked about the jealous again, the jealousy, the kingship. We sometimes get faint at heart because of things around us. They look dim. Then we're losing our focus of God. However, God's word is his word. In Numbers, it said, God is not a man that he should lie. So, how can David be king if he's dead? So, at this point, David is discouraged. He's in despair. He's lost sight of God. He's taken his focus off and he's just looking at, what's going on around him. So in chapter 21, David was looking for refuge and he went to Gath. He had Goliath's sword with him. They all knew that he had killed Goliath. At that time, he pretended to be insane in front of the king. What makes this time different? He's decided to go to Gath. What makes this time different?
Sister Anita, praise the Lord,
Yes.
everyone. This is Cheryl.
Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning. Happy Palm Sunday to everyone. That first verse, David, after coming off of such a high, spiritual and emotional high. I wasn't with you all last week, but I remember reading it and I got excited about what lied ahead for him, knowing, of course, the story. But Davidson is having a moment, a humanistic moment. Pessimism. He's dealing with that. For him to say these things to himself about himself, knowing that he has heard from God, you're going to be. He's been anointed. Abigail spoke over his life. Jonathan, his dear friend, has spoke over his life. He knows these things, but these moments are cloudy and dark. Pessimism sets in. He's human. He's in his flesh. He's having a moment and believing the wrong thing.
Yes, David is human. Yes.
And so thinking that he'll perish is definitely not. You can't be king if you're going to perish by the hands of the man that you're going to have victory over. Okay, that's it.
Yes, I like it. I like it. Yes, he is human. I'm going to talk about that a little bit more. Anyone else? Any other comments about what makes this time different? Well, another thing that makes this time different is that David isn't alone. Or one thing, I'm sorry, that makes this time different. David is not alone. David has more than 600 men with him. Even though he has the 600 men, Pastor talked about this a few weeks ago in a different scenario where when you talk about how many fighting men you have, he's had 600 fighting men, but he also had young men in training. He also had families, these wives and their children. And I don't know about you all, but when it comes to your family, even though women may not have necessarily been fighters back then, but if a fight breaks out and it's you and your child, sometimes it's going to stir up in you. You're going to battle as well. You're going to try to protect your family as well. So this time David wasn't alone. He came with an army, he came with reinforcement. And with that reinforcement, also keep in mind that Saul is the enemy of both of them. So he's in Philistine area. They are against Israel, and he's coming with 600 plus. So it looks a little different this time. He was by himself the last time. It looks different this time. What didn't David do in these verses? What didn't David do in these first 3 verses?
He didn't talk to the Lord.
Yes.
Didn't consult him as he should have.
Correct. He did not. He didn't ask the priest, Abiathar, anything. There was no guidance. He didn't ask for any guidance from God in these first 3 verses. So in that, in not acknowledging him, that also might have played a part into why he was feeling pessimistic or discouraged about what was going on right at that particular point. David is human. I like that because I had notes about it. So he's been courageous. He's shown humility, kindness, remorse. He's been scared and lied. He's shown restraint, mercy, love, and faith. But at this time, he's letting his situation look bigger than God. When he looks at it in comparison, he has a smaller army. He only has 600. Saul came with 3,000. The Ziphites, his own people, they ratted him out. He's not safe in his homeland. So yes, David is human. So David is discouraged. He's pessimistic. David is human at this particular point, and he's letting his feelings control his faith. In Psalms chapter 42, that chapter talks about being in despair, but hope in God. We can always turn to the word when it comes to being in despair. There's always something there that we can find. Any thoughts before I move on? Okay. Let's see. Okay. When Saul was told that David had fled to Gath, he no longer searched for him. Then David said to Achish, "If I have found favor in your eyes, let a place be assigned to me in one of the country towns, that I may live there. Why should your servant live in the royal city with you?" So on that day, Achish gave him Ziklag, and it has belonged to the kings of Judah ever since. Okay, so Christy talked about in the first verses the history that Saul has had in searching for David and why David might have felt the way he did. A few weeks ago, Pastor Cheryl gave us, she had us searching out the times that Saul tried to kill David. So from chapter 18 up to about now, Saul has attempted to kill David at least 13 times. In shame, Saul went home 2 times after David could have killed him. First time David he asked David to swear between him and God, not to cut off his house when he became king. And then we just read chapter 26, where he spoke blessings. And actually, he spoke blessings in chapter 24 when he asked David not to cut off his family as well. But Saul continues to search for David. And this is really a good reason. It's reasonable for David to feel the way that he did in verse 1. But again, he can't be king if he's dead. So he lost his focus. He lost his focus on God. And he didn't pray. He hasn't prayed. And thus far, we're into the 6th verse. He still hasn't prayed. He hasn't asked for any guidance. So David asked for a country town out of the city. What are your thoughts about this request?
Sister Anita,
Yes.
David's and his men are in a place where they don't believe the same spiritually. They don't worship the same. It would be very awkward, perhaps, for them to be right in the midst of all of the idolatry and the nonsense and the worshiping of dead and those kinds of things, those kinds of behaviors, rather, if they were to remain. So to be able to go to a location outside of the main location, Achish and his camp, it would give them some freedom and flexibility to worship the way that they're comfortable worshiping. I think that's one reason. I'm sure there are others.
I think that's a reason too.
I think that's, I agree with you, Pastor Cheryl. And I think this is just another example of David's political savviness. Because everything that you said, Pastor Cheryl, is, I think, agree, is absolutely correct. But I also think he has positioned it in such a way in his language that Achish, whatever is how you pronounce it, is not offended or even put on guard by what he's saying. So it just, again, speaks to just that political savviness and knowing what to say at the right time, which is what he did with Saul in chapter 26 as well.
Excuse me. Yes, I totally agree with both. They did not worship the same. So, excuse me, yes, he would be able to worship God the way he wanted to without the scrutiny of Achish. Also, what if Achish became like Saul and he got jealous? What if people started talking about what David has done and David, is going to be the king and so on and so forth. Yeah, he didn't want to be in eyesight of the king of Gath to give him any reason to think that David would be a threat to them. Any other thoughts? Okay, so Ziklag. He was given Ziklag. Ziklag was originally assigned to Judah in Joshua chapter 15.
What does Ziklag mean in the Bible?
Ziklag. Thank you, Ziklag. Did I miss something?
No, Watsika was off.
I'm sorry.
Oh, okay. I'm
I'm trying
sorry.
to figure out what Ziklag. I had looked it up and then I said, let me go back. I didn't know I was on let me get off of here.
You know, that makes me extremely proud, Watsika.
I hate this. I thought it was off. I'm sorry, y'all.
It's okay. It's okay. So yeah, Ziklag was originally assigned to Judah in Joshua chapter 15. part of the land was inherited by Simeon, Jacob and Leah's second son. And that was in Joshua chapter 19. That is rather in Joshua chapter 19. But eventually this land just became up under Philistine rule. So this was a temporary refuge place where David could strategize. He could regroup, and also now he's laid claim to that as part of Israel, because verse 6 state that after that time it belonged to the kings of Israel ever since. So David he's strategizing. Christy said political savviness. He is being a little cunning, even though he hasn't prayed about anything. He hasn't asked for guidance from God. He's still strategizing. He's basically he's trying to survive. Any comments before I move on? Okay. Okay. David lived in Philistine territory a year and 4 months. Now, when David and his men went up and raided the Jezreelites, the Girzites, and the Amalekites, from ancient times, these peoples have lived in the land extending to Shur and Egypt. Whenever David attacked an area, he did not leave a man or woman alive, but took sheep and cattle, donkeys and camels and clothes. Then he returned to Achish. So as you look at these verses here, think about negatives and positives. So the Geshurites dwelt in the desert between Arabia and Philistia. The Girzites are a Canaanite tribe conquered under Joshua. Does anybody remember what happened with Saul and the Amalekites? The Amalekites pop up a lot. Anybody know the significance between Saul and the Amalekites, or remember what we discussed? Okay. Well, in chapter 14, Saul defeated them. And in chapter 15, he was supposed to destroy everybody and everything as instructed through the Lord by Samuel. And because he didn't, that's why he was rejected by God as Israel's king. So all these areas, these 3 areas right here, they're Philistine areas and they are enemies to Israel. So has anyone thought about anything negative or positive that they see? Or that they look at and could see that, that could be a negative, that could be a positive.
I was doing a little bit of research, and I didn't realize it as I was reading it, is in this moment, David is, again, a little politically savvy because he is attacking the common enemies of Saul. But at the same time, he's really not, back to the point that Pastor Cheryl made and you made earlier, he's not seeking God for any of these actions that he's taking. So he's just basically out murdering people and taking the loot, basically. with no direction from God.
So a positive could be that he's attacking areas that are enemies to Israel. And negative could be that he has not consulted God at all. Another negative is that it's unprovoked. So these raids that he's doing, these attacks, they're actually unprovoked. He's not under a king's orders to do it. He wasn't instructed by God to do it. At this point, is he a murderer?
He's behaving as a military strategist in many ways, because as we move on into the lesson, we understand the logic behind it. But I want to throw something out here, and I don't want to get offended, but yeah, it's sort of carnal behavior when we do things outside, not sort of, it's carnal behavior when we do things outside of the will of God. And on one hand, it has its pluses. And then, of course, you have to look at what are the negative connotations here. Back to you, teacher.
Thank you. Yes, the military strategy is good. That could be considered a positive. David killed. Oh, I'm sorry. Someone's going to say something.
That's what I think. Although it's strategy and so forth, he's kind of looking like a renegade, I mean, he's killing innocent people, and though there's a method and a reason behind it, you could almost, back to your comment, he does appear to be like a murderer slash, he's just kind of on the run and he's killing folks. So it could go either way depending on how you look at it.
Yep, renegade. He killed the Amalekites, which Saul was ordered to do, told to do. That could be considered a positive. God had wanted them to be wiped out. They keep popping up though. But yeah, that could be a positive. And all these areas again are enemies of Israel. So yeah, that could be a positive. David is protected. Christie's title for last week was God's protection and mercy. It's a positive that no matter what has happened up to this point, David has been protected by God. He might think he's being protected by Achish. Appearance might look like he's being protected by Achish because he's in the Gath, he's in Philistine territory, but it's not. It's the Lord. God's word has to be fulfilled. He has to become king. So he's protecting his next king. Any other comments? Okay. Would someone like to read these last 3 verses? There's one additional slide after this, maybe 2. Can anybody see my slides?
I'll read it.
Thank you.
When Achish asked, "Where did you go raiding today?" David would say, "Against the Negit, I don't know. Y'all just hanging there with me, the pronunciation of these words, of Judah, or against the Negit, or Jerahmeel, or against the Jiva of the Kenites." I hope y'all got a meaning out of that. Man, I chopped that up. He did not leave a man or woman alive to be brought to Gath, for he thought they might inform on us and say, this is what David did. And such was his practice as long as he lived in Philistine territory. Achish trusted David and said to himself, he has become so obnoxious to his people, the Israelites, that he will be my servant for life.
Thank you, thank you. Yeah, I didn't want to
words.
tackle those words either.
Oh, so you threw it on me?
Negev.
Yeah, just embarrass me. All right, go ahead.
Oh no, Negev. I think
Oh,
Negev. That's what
Negev.
I'm gonna say.
I don't know what
Negev.
it was.
It actually means south. So
Okay.
I should have told you could say south of Judah, south
Oh, it's
of
okay. All right.
Jeremiel. So question: how did Achish not know what David had been doing? So I'll give you an example. Current technology aside, TV, radio, cars, cell phones, current technology aside, could Dayton be demolished without Cincinnati knowing? So we're what, 50, 60 miles. Dayton is up the road. I know David killed every man, every woman. Nobody was left alive. But still, could a whole city be demolished, destroyed, and nobody know? Thoughts?
If you wipe out the entire city, and he wiped it out so that no one could come back and say, I was a part of this massacre, or I survived the massacre. It is not impossible, obviously.
Word spread. So when Saul wanted David dead, he put the word out there. People were talking. When David killed Goliath, word spread. People were talking. The word got out.
Yes, ma'am, you're correct. Those circumstances, that's exactly what happened. This seems to be different.
It does.
Is unfolding differently than those previous situations that you mentioned.
Achish trusted David. Now, just I don't know, maybe a month ago, he thought he was insane. And now he's back with 600 plus. He's given him Ziklag, the whole town, to himself. And he trusts David. He has no idea what's going on, and he trusts David. If that's not God's protection, I don't know what is. Now, this is the second time David has lied. He lied about what he did. So this chapter is kind of out of character for David. Would you say that? Would anybody agree with that?
I would say that because we've been saying that all the things that he was doing now and all the moves and action he was taking, he did not consult God of any of this before he done it, and the things that he done, his actions.
So would that be out of character, out of his norm?
Yeah, that was
So this is a chapter, these 12 verses, they don't speak anything about David praying to God or asking for guidance about a situation. but he fares pretty well. He fares well. He's just trying to survive. He's trying to survive. He knows he's been anointed. But right now, he's just trying to survive. And again, God's word has to be fulfilled. So David has been strategic.
Strategic and being deceptive. Is that what you're saying?
David is deceptive. I like it.
So
Yeah.
here again, it goes back to that C word. We deal with carnality, each and every one of us. So that carnal aspect of us is on display here. And yes, God is protecting. God is in control of it all. But David is deceptive. David was
is deceptive. Yes.
Being carnal.
In his humanness, yes.
Yes, it goes right back to that. Yes, ma'am. Back to you.
Any other thoughts?
I don't know if it was mentioned yet, but the other part of this was the fact that, David still has these same 600 men who signed up with him from the very beginning, who were these misfit, bunch of people who were at different phases of life and grief and disappointments. And as he has now also gone to Achish, which is Philistine territory, he has also taken these same 600 men away from God, in essence, as well. So not only is David doing, whether he's doing the right thing or the wrong thing, I mean, if we were in that position, I think we'd all just be running. I wouldn't necessarily maybe think about the area, but there is a broader impact than just him.
I agree. I agree. I don't know what my time is. Okay. So I wanted to show you all this map. The red line and the gold line I drew in there. So the top part, I don't know if you can see my arrow, Judah is up there at the top. And you can see the Kenites and the Jerahmeelites over here. You can see Ziklag. These are the towns that David inherited that became a part of Israel from the time that he inherited. So I tried to draw a little map, kind of like the line to try to show you where Judah is, all of this area, where he told Achish he was raiding, which then would make Achish not be suspect of him, because these are all in Israel area, when in essence, he did away with these three areas over here. So you can see where now the line for Israel has grown. The territory somewhat has grown. So now this is all really part of Israel, part of Judah. Minister Gary told us a couple weeks ago as well that David had been on the run during that time about 10 years. And it took David, from the information that I gathered, about 15 years to become king. Where was he first crowned king? In what area was he first crowned king? He was first crowned king in Judah.
Crown king or anointed to be king?
Anointed. Anointed. I'm sorry. Yes, anointed. Thank you. Yes, anointed in Judah. So look at all this area that he now has. And I want to say David is a king. He may not have been thinking about God, or he may have, lost a little faith at this particular time. But he was still thinking, I want to believe that he was still thinking as a king. This was enemies to Israel. Now he has all of this area. Even though Saul didn't know it, or doesn't say that Saul knew, because Saul supposedly stopped searching for him. But now all of this belongs to Israel as well. So my last thoughts, does anybody want to say anything?
I love this map. That's a great way. Pastor Cheryl saying the same thing. What a great way of visualizing this. That's really good perspective.
Thank you. So my last thoughts here. David knows he's anointed to be king. So in knowing who you are in God means that you're acting differently. That, David has not acted as some people would have expected. He didn't kill Saul like he thought he was going to kill Nabal, but his wife talked him out of it. He has killed, murdered. He's done something. He's acted out of character. I mean, he's acted differently. I'm sorry. He's acted differently. So I want to say in David's journey, he has displayed the fruit of the Spirit. We talk about the fruit of the Spirit, Galatians chapter 5. Today, he is long suffering. He has been waiting. He has been running. He's wandering. He's in his human self, but still, he has displayed at different times fruit of the Spirit. I talked about it earlier. Mercy, he's shown mercy. He's shown love. He's shown goodness. He's shown kindness. And today he's long suffering. 15 years is a long time to wait on anything. Sometimes we think a day is a long time to wait for something. We got microwaves now, so who uses an oven all the time? Not me. When we look at the fruit of the Spirit, it's a package. You can't have one without the other. If you got the Spirit, you got them all. We can't determine what day we're going to have to do one or the other, show one or the other. But we got to remember in our daily walk, the fruit of the Spirit is a package. Any comments? No comments? Okay. Can someone pray us out? We have any prayer requests?
I'll pray us out. Any prayer requests?